All right, today we're opening an investigative file on one of the most remote and mysterious places on Earth, Antarctica. And no, we're not talking about penguins. This is a briefing on some seriously strange claims from classified military missions to satellite photos that, well, just don't make a lot of sense.
You know, the one question that really fuels all of this is pretty simple. You've got a continent bigger than the United States, buried under miles of ice. What could be down there? Perfectly preserved. Are we just looking at weird natural formations, or is there something else going on at the very bottom of the world? Let's take a look at the evidence.
So, where do we even begin? I think we have to start with the most dramatic evidence, which is also the hardest to prove: the eyewitnesses. We're talking about accounts from military guys who claim they saw things they were then ordered to pretend never happened.
So listen to this. This warning was supposedly given to a U.S. Navy flight crew way back in 1985. So what did they do wrong? Well, they had a medical emergency, so they had to fly over a designated no-fly zone. And what they saw was a massive hole in the ice. We're talking 300 feet wide, with vehicle tracks leading right down into it. After the mission, they weren't debriefed by their usual commanders. Instead, these men in suits showed up and made it crystal clear. This incident never happened.
Okay, let's pull up another case file. This one comes from a Navy flight engineer who goes by the code name Brian. Back in '95, his crew gets scrambled to find 15 missing scientists. They get to the camp and it's completely empty. It's like they just evaporated. Then, a week later, they get another call. The scientists are back. The crew goes to rescue them and finds them, well, in a state of shock. Totally silent, just catatonic. And you guessed it, when Brian's crew got back to base, they were met by another group of men in suits from DC, and the whole mission was slapped with a top-secret classification.
And then there's this account from 2003 from a Navy SEAL commander known as Spartan 1. He says he found a massive, black, octagonal structure sticking out of the ice. He described the door opening with almost no effort, and inside, it was a wild scene. The temperature was a balmy 70 degrees, even though it was 40 below outside, and there were no lights, just a soft green glow coming from the walls themselves, which were covered in some kind of hieroglyphs. A scientist with them claimed the place was over 60 acres, and that the lower levels were occupied. Just, not by humans.
Okay, so we've heard the stories, they're pretty wild. But now let's pivot from things we can't verify to something we can all look at for ourselves: satellite images. Can we actually find proof in the pixels on Google Earth? Or is it just our brains playing tricks on us, seeing faces in the clouds, or, in this case, structures in the ice?
First up, a fan favorite, the Antarctic pyramids. The claim is that these have to be man-made. I mean, look at them. One of them supposedly aligns almost perfectly to the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. That's really, really unlikely to happen naturally. But the official scientific explanation is that they're just nunatox. It's a fun word. It just means it's the rocky peak of a mountain sticking up through the ice. So, what do you think? Intelligent design or a really cool-looking rock?
And here's another famous one. At first glance, it really does look like a crashed cigar-shaped ship, right? Some people even pointed out how much it looked like Oumuamua, that interstellar object that zipped through our solar system. But gotta say, the official explanation on this one is pretty convincing. When you zoom out and look at the full, uncropped photo, you can see the whole story. There's a rocky outcropping up the hill where a huge boulder or chunk of ice clearly broke off and just slid down, leaving that trail behind it. Looks like this one is pretty much debunked. Now this one's a bit more suspicious. Back in 2007, this image pops up on Google Earth. It shows this huge, 250-foot wide cave entrance, and if you look closely, you can even make out what look like steps leading into it. But then, a few months after people started talking about it, the image was gone. It reappeared years later in 2020, but here's the kicker. The new image is way lower resolution. It's all blurry, right where those interesting details used to be. So, what do you think? A deliberate cover-up, or just Google switching to a different, worse satellite photo? Okay, so let's shift gears. We're going to move away from modern satellite data and dive into some really old artifacts, because this is where the timeline of what we think we know just gets completely bent out of shape. We're talking about ancient maps. Maps that seem to show Antarctica hundreds of years before anyone officially found it. And even crazier, they show it without any ice. Just look at this timeline. The history books tell us Antarctica was officially discovered in 1820 as a completely frozen wasteland. But check out the Piri Reis map from 1513 or the Orientius Funius map from 1531.
Both clearly show a continent right where Antarctica is. And they don't just show a blob of land, they show a detailed ice-free coastline with mountain ranges deep in the interior that we've only been able to map in modern times using radar. So, how on earth did mapmakers in the 1500s know what was under all that ice? The potential answer goes back, way back.
The main explanation for this comes from a pretty wild and very controversial geological idea called the crustal displacement theory. It was pushed by a historian named Charles Hapgood, and the basic idea is that the Earth's entire outer crust, its skin, can sometimes just slip and slide over the molten core underneath. The theory suggests that about 12,000 years ago, a massive shift like this happened, and it violently moved the landmass of Antarctica from a warmer part of the world to the South Pole, basically flash freezing it, and any civilization that might have been there.
Okay, so all of this speculation, ancient maps, secret bases, alien structures, it all eventually crashes right into a big, real-world wall of modern politics. And that wall is called the Antarctic Treaty. If you want to understand why we can't all just grab a snowmobile and go check this stuff out for ourselves, you have to understand the rules that have put this entire continent on lockdown. And just to give you a sense of scale, we are talking about a massive area, 5.4 million square miles. It's all governed by this one international agreement, the Antarctic Treaty, signed back in 1959, and it's still in effect today. And the rules of this treaty, they are strict. What started with 12 nations is now up to 56. The continent is carved up into different zones of control, and if you're a private citizen, well, good luck. Independent exploration is basically forbidden, and huge areas are designated as no-fly zones. And wouldn't you know it, a lot of those zones happen to be right over where these weird anomalies are supposed to be. The official reason, of course, is to protect a fragile ecosystem, but to a conspiracy theorist, that sounds an awful lot like a convenient excuse to hide something. So, let's wrap up this briefing. Let's do a final assessment. When we lay it all out, how do these incredible claims actually stack up against the evidence that we can verify? Let's break it down. The claim of a giant hole in the ice and the claim of an alien structure, they both rely completely on a single anonymous source. They're amazing stories, but they're impossible to confirm. The pyramids we can see in photos, they're disputed. A natural rock formation is a perfectly good explanation. And the crashed spaceship? That one seems pretty solidly debunked. It's almost certainly just a big rock that rolled down a hill. Seeing it all laid out like this really helps put the whole mystery in perspective. Which brings us to the final big question. After looking at the testimony, the satellite photos, the old maps, where does that leave us? Are these just a bunch of tall tales mixed with some cool-looking geology and a few misinterpreted pictures? Or is there an entire chapter of our planet's history still frozen down there, waiting under the ice? A secret so big that the powers of the world have all agreed to keep it buried. Now, the evidence is in your hands.